we have a public health crisis in this country, and unfortunately, West Virginia is leading the way. It's the highest obesity rate of any state in our country. This year, you pulled ahead of Mississippi. It has the highest rate of chronic disease in the country. And so I'm very, very grateful to Governor Morrissey for his visionary leadership in getting West Virginia to lead the way in transitioning off of processed foods. When my uncle was president, 3% of Americans had chronic disease. We spent zero on chronic disease in this country, zero. There was no medications for it. Today, we spend $1.3 trillion on chronic disease every year. It's about 90% of our healthcare budget. And for most of my life, the Republicans and Democrats have been fighting about a healthcare plan, about treatment, really a sick care plan, about how to treat all this illness. Should it be Obamacare, the affordable health plan? Should it be public-private partnerships? Should it be a single payer? These are what the big battles that you read about on Capitol Hill. The real battle is that we're getting sicker and sicker every year. And it's really just a debate about who's going to pay the treatment. Nobody has been focused on how do we get ourselves less sick. And it's like moving deck chairs around on the Titanic. No matter what you do, our country is going to go bankrupt. It's now, when I was a kid, diabetes rates in children were almost zero. Juvenile diabetes, a typical pediatrician would see one case of diabetes in his lifetime over a 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door is pre-diabetic or diabetic. 38% of teens are now diabetic, 50% of adults. A few years ago, it's not a mystery about where this is coming from. 20 years ago, there was no diabetes in China. Today, 50% of the population is diabetic. Why is that? They built 20,000 fast food joints in China and started selling American processed food. And it is costing us, we are now paying more just for diabetes, mitochondrial dysfunction, than we are for our military. And, financially, it is bankrupting our country. We're now spending more to service our debt, and the biggest piece of that debt is coming from healthcare. We're now paying more to service it than we are for our military budget. Within about 10 years, if we continue on this trajectory, 50 cents out of every tax dollar that you pay to the federal government is going to go to servicing the debt. Within 15 years, 100%. It's not sustainable. It's existential. If you love our country, you got to take care of yourselves. President Trump said that he wants to make America healthy again, but he wants to make it strong again. We cannot have a strong country if we have sick citizens. President Trump says that he wants to restore the American dream. But a person who is healthy has 1,000 dreams. A person who is sick has only one. And there is 60% of our country now that has only one dream, which is to get better. And we need to give them a pathway to doing that. And the pathway is through food. Food is medicine. It treats us in different ways, and it treats our health. It treats our mental health. There was a recent study that showed that when they switched the diet in prisons, that violence went down to a whole food diet. That violence went down by about 70%. When they switched the diet in juvenile detention centers, the whole food diet, violence went down 100%. There's a scientist at Harvard now who is curing schizophrenia with a carnivore diet. So the loneliness, the dispossession, the crisis that we have in mental health, in suicide, in ADD, ADHD, all of these are linked, and particularly to the dyes. It's very clear the dyes that Governor Morrissey is banning, all of them are linked in very, very strong studies to ADHD and to cancers. So we're seeing an explosion in cancers in this country. We're seeing an explosion in infertility. Teenagers today have 50% of the sperm count and 50% of the testosterone of 68-year-old men. Girls are now reaching puberty 6 years earlier than they're supposed to, between 10 and 13 years old. Other countries are not experiencing this. We've seen autism rates go from 1 in 10,000 when I was a kid, 1 in 10,000, 1 in every 36 kids today, 1 in 22 boys in California. And the obesity rates have gone up to, as I said, 50% in adults, or 70% overall obesity or overweight, from 3%. In Japan, it's still 3%, because they're not eating these foods. They have nutrition programs in the foods where they have a nutritionist in every school who's in charge of the menu, and they eat healthy foods, so they don't have these illnesses. And we, when I was a kid, we were the healthiest, most robust people in the world. And today we're the sickest. 60% of Americans, from 3% when my uncle was president, 60% today have chronic disease. And it's not happening in other countries. During COVID, we had 16% of the COVID deaths in this country. We only have 4.2% of the world's population. So we literally did worse than any country in the world. And when you ask CDC, why are Americans dying from COVID at higher rates than any place on earth when we have all the money? They said, well, it's not our fault. It's because Americans are so sick. That is their fault. And we're going to change that. But they said that according to CDC, the average American who died from COVID had 3.8 chronic diseases. So they had diabetes, they had obesity, and maybe asthma, and one other thing. And it was the chronic disease really that was killing them. Healthy kids were not dying. Healthy Americans were not dying of COVID. It was a disease that attacked the sick. And that's true with all infectious diseases. If we can make ourselves, the biggest thing that we can do for pandemic preparedness is to make ourselves healthy again. We're now, 74% of American kids cannot qualify for military service because of chronic disease. So this is affecting our national security. It's destroying our economy. It is existential for this country. And we need to change it. And I am so happy that you have a visionary governor in this state and that West Virginia is now leading the way. And I want to commend Governor Morrissey not only for his vision, but for his courage, because it's very, very hard. And for these legislatures who are pushing this bill, all of them are getting calls every day from the big soda companies, the sugar soda and the fake food companies. We're not eating food, we're eating food-like substances. And I'll tell you what happened. I was involved in the tobacco litigation back in the late 1980s. And the tobacco companies were, at that time, the cash-richest companies in the world. But they saw the writing on the wall. They saw that the consumer base was turning against them. People were stopping smoking, and that they were being prosecuted and sued successfully. So they settled those lawsuits, but they also started shifting their resources to diversify their companies. And they went out and they bought the food companies. So by 1994, the two biggest food companies in the world were R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris, tobacco companies. They took about 10,000 scientists who were all engaged in nefarious ways to make tobacco more addictive, and they put them to work making food addictive, inventing ingredients in the laboratory that would make it do things to food. For example, they found out that food that you fill up, your brain tells you your stomach is filled, in part by counting the number of times you chew. So they started adding softeners to our food so that you wouldn't chew so much, so you'd have a sense that you're unsatisfied, that you're insatiable, that you're never full, so that you keep pouring it down your mouth. And that's just one of the many things they did. They added sodium and sugar. Sugar is as addictive as crack, and it's almost as bad for you. It kills you just as surely, it just kills you a little slower. It feeds tumors, it destroys your body, it destroys your brain. And they added more and more sugar to make us addicted to their products. And these companies are now, just like the tobacco companies were, are flooding into the offices of your state leaders and legislatures of the governor, and they're telling him he's making a big mistake. They're telling them that they're going to stop writing checks, that they're going to run people against them, that they're going to destroy their political careers. And Governor Morrissey was telling me that he met with the soda companies this week, and they said to him, you need to be educated about this. And they said, you know, food stamps is not a nutrition program. He came in with his Diet Coke, and he said, is there anything nutritious in here? And they were like, no, of course not. But food stamps is not a nutrition program. And he said, it's called SNAP, Supplementary Nutrition Assistance Program. It's supposed to be nutrition. It's not supposed to be food-like substances that are actually poisoning us. And so, but it takes a lot of courage to stand up to these companies the same way that it did to stand up to big tobacco. But these men and women, your leaders, Governor Morrissey, is standing up for you. And we all need to stand up for ourselves and take care of ourselves. It's an act of patriotism. If you love this country, you need to start taking care of yourselves. And I also say this, that food companies all came and met with me 2 weeks ago. And they're scared of me, but they're more scared of Governor Morrissey. Because what they said, and the reason they said, well, tell us what you want, and we're going to do it. And they said, but stop these governors from passing these laws, because we don't want a patchwork where West Virginia and California are banning food dyes, and we have to make special products for those states. So they're terrified of this, of what you're doing. And the message that I want to give to the country today and to all the other governors is get in line behind Governor Morrissey and apply for a waiver to my agency, and we're going to give it to you. But that's the way we're going to win this. I want to thank all of you. I want to thank the Maha moms who got me into this office, and President Trump, who has given me free rein to do anything I need to do to make America healthy again. And then I particularly want to thank Governor Morrissey and these legislators for their courage, for their vision, for their willingness to stand up to the most powerful industries in the world, to stand up for the people of West Virginia and set an example, a shining example of the rest of the country. Thank you all very much.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.